Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Canadian Immigration Live Q&A with myself, Mark Holthe, and my co-host, Alicia Backman-Bahari. How are you doing, Alicia?
I am well. It feels like summer out there today. There's green grass because we finally had rain. I don't know, Southern Alberta's been in a really bad drought situation, so we we had all of our rain in one day, it kind of seemed like. So
Yeah,
there was a deluge and then everything is beautiful and green outside. So
yeah. That's the part that I love most this time of year, as everything is green, and then, of course, it doesn't take long for it to then turn brown, but that's okay. So yeah, the lawn, I was beginning to worry a little bit about it, but we had a little bit of extra help from the rain, which is awesome. And yeah, it's nice to walk out on the grass and it be warm and run your bare feet through the grass. So it's yes, definitely a highlight. So we're still waiting for some of these announcements from immigration, Alicia. And
yeah.
it's interesting, notwithstanding that, while we've been waiting for the 18-month postgrad work permit, instructions, those program delivery instructions to open up, and while we've been waiting for further information on what's going to happen with the Ukraine family sponsorship process, the government magically decides to announce as extensions to super visas. And in fairness, I think they just like to keep in the top of people's minds and share a little bit of insight. But I'll just share my screen here. If you go, everybody, you can actually go, if you search Super Visa Canada Update 2022, the government's here. And then we did, let's see right here, this one here. We did a little update on this just yesterday, a little video, and you guys can go back to the YouTube channel and watch this one. I broke down, went through everything. Really, there's not a whole lot that's associated with it, but just providing a little bit of insight as to what it means for people that are looking to sponsor really support a parent or grandparent that's coming into Canada for the purposes of the super visa process. And really, it's all about them being able to stay in Canada longer, so up to 5 years per entry. And this is a pretty significant development. So yeah, so they announced that, which was really good. And like I said, if you just go back, you can actually, if we flip back here, you can go back to our YouTube channel, and those of you who are watching right now, the videos are there, and you can watch it and just get up to date. Alicia, I got a question for you. Like, what's the big deal about this? Like, why are they doing this with the super visa? Why are they saying, okay, for temporary applications, if your parent and grandparent wants to come here, they can stay for 5 years? Like, what are they getting at?
So of course there's two big categories, right? There's temporary entry and there's a permanent residence category. And on a super visa, we are still talking about temporary categories, right? If you're bringing your parent, this is on a temporary basis. Most of the time, though, when people come on a temporary basis, the general rule is you can only stay for 6 months. And so the difficulty with the parent visa applications is often the parent wants to stay for longer, they're retired, they want to spend time with grandkids, they want to be here in Canada. And so, in order to address this desire, and because Canada's not really inviting parents and grandparents under the PR programs because there's such a backlog with that, plus it's a lotto system in order to get into that, they said, well, let's give people a temporary solution that's longer term in nature. And it used to be 2 years, so parents could come for 2 years at a time once they were granted that super visa. But I think there's been problems with the pandemic, there's been problems with travel, there are still problems with travel, and they want to have an easier mechanism to allow people to have extended healthcare coverage, which has to be purchased separately for this program, and also to be able to stay for a slightly longer period of time, well, more than double, I guess, longer period of time, so that they can have a longer solution to the issue, to the problem, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. As I look at the evolution of the parent grandparent sponsorship in general, there's always been way more demand than there's possibly ever room for people to come. And it was really cruel, to say to people, hey, we've got a parent and grandparent process, and yeah, you can sponsor them, but you'll have to wait 15 years or whatever for it to be processed. That was the early year. That was the
Mm-hmm.
early period, right, Alicia, when we first started practicing,
Yep.
15 plus years ago. And then they decided, well, that isn't going to work because people are going to be dead by the time the applications are processed. So then they shifted to kind of almost a first quota system. First, whoever can race to get the applications in first wins. And I remember the courier companies that, you know, they'd hire a courier company to go and deliver packages. I remember hearing about one consulting outfit that had, like, I don't know how many applications, like 300 that they flew someone to the processing center um, in Atlantic, Canada, to drop and hand deliver the applications to make sure they were in the queue first. And then they decided, well, that isn't going to work, so let's do an online filing. And then it became a race to file, and
Yeah.
whoever had the fastest keystrokes. And then they went to an open lottery. So you've got a
Yeah.
certain period of time to do it. So they've been searching. But the thing that's been most frustrating for me is that since I've been involved with the CBA for the last at least 6 years, our solution has always been a weighted lottery. And if someone is applied for 5 years in a row, they should rank higher than anyone else that is
Yeah.
applied for 4 or 3 or 2 or 1. And they should be able to track this. But for whatever reason, they've said that the system isn't designed to do that. Well, holy cow. I remember when I filed under the race to file, and I kept the most important client in our firm. But my paralegal and my immigration consultant had a little bit faster fingers, and they were able to see the link and click on it first. Well, after the fact, while at the time for me, it never did appear on my screen. I never could see the link. And the reason was because they apparently, after two IP addresses at this, two applications going through the same IP address, they didn't allow for any other. So the client that was most important didn't get through for our firm because, I was blocked out with my computer. And I'm like, holy cow, you guys can do that, but you can't figure out how to do a weighted lottery for people. So, yes, it's frustrating, but this is a pretty massive thing. And I don't know too many countries, at least in the Western world, that have these types of programs that allow people to stay up to 5 years, because that's pretty permanent. Obviously, medicals, you need to show that you're not causing a drain on, Canadian health or even social services for that matter. And so it is a pretty cool thing. And with the massive processing times that they're dealing with, they're doing everything they can to try to either extend things, the duration, to issue them for longer so people don't have to apply as frequently. And that's really what we're getting at. They're just trying to get their, the ship righted and sailing in the right direction. So
Yeah.
updates, interesting. And we're just about to the reinitiation of the express entry draws, aren't we?
Yep.
Um,
And that's causing a lot of uncertainty now too, right? In terms of people saying, well, I have a great CRS score, but when are they going to implement these changes? What's the new legislation going to be once it goes through the draft and the readings? And how, what are the criteria going to be in the future about express entry? Because in the past we had some certainty, but we're moving into a whole new era.
yeah, we sure are. If we look at draws, they've continued with their PNPs. So yesterday they did another round of invitation, and there's 932 issued, and these are all provincial nominee um, recipients who are eligible. So we can expect there's probably going to be one more of these before June, and then how soon in July? Maybe the beginning of July we might see a no program specified draw. It just depends on how fast the politicians want to have their summer vacation, and whether or not they consider those changes to express entry to be something that they want to really push through quickly. Personally, I don't
Yeah.
think they're going to be able to do that, but I know there's a lot of pressure on the minister to restart, and they don't want to just open it up if it's not meeting the specific economic targets and labor shortage areas where the statistics are telling them we need people, and that's a very, very significant priority. So I guess anything is possible, right? It's possible.
Yeah. So in my consults, people have been asking, well, you know, even if I have over 500 points, am I going to get an ITA if they manage to pass this legislation?
Mhm.
And then there's new ministerial instructions, which are then targeting certain economic groups or certain profiles of people in the express entry pool. And I think there's really a couple scenarios. I think under one scenario, they open up the draws in July and they keep it as it is, right? They're just going to
Yeah.
pull the cream of the crop off with the highest CRS scores. But it's also possible that they do manage to get this legislation passed. There's some urgency federally about it. And maybe we will start seeing new ministerial instructions along with these ITAs that say we're targeting this economic output, and here are the people we're going to give invitations to apply to. And maybe that'll happen sooner rather than later.
Yeah. And when you think about it, lots of people say, well, why did he wait until July? Why didn't he start this sooner? And we know the levels plans with how many individuals there actually have room to admit as permanent residents. That's a deciding factor. It's an important component to this. And if they'd already met the quota for this whole year, well, that plays a role into why they waited mid-year. Usually for most people who are just receiving ITAs, it takes at least 6 months for them to go through the whole process and be ready to land as permanent residents in Canada. And so that played a role. But it's also, as I look through this, these things don't just happen overnight. So the new bill that's working its way through through Parliament, that bill is something that's been in the works for a while. And that may also have led to them guessing, well, we should have that pushed through by July. So, then we can start doing these more targeted draws. I'm sure it all plays a role, but at the end of the day, all those of you out there who are looking at, whether or not Canada is a possible destination for you and have been waiting patiently for the draws to resume, there's still a lot of uncertainty. But one thing we can guarantee you guys is that the moment we learn anything, there's any updates, sometimes I get little sneak peeks with the Canadian Bar Association. Sometimes they share a little insight. But in this case, I really don't think we're going to see anything until it's just there. So be ready for anything. And in some cases, some of you may not be able to make it. The rules may change. And as we look at the totals, you can see very easily here that the 500 to 600, we're looking at 7,637 that are in the pool right now. And the moment things open up again, there's going to be a pile more people that jump in. So understand that's a reality. And others will have lower CRS scores, but happen to be possibly in that specific targeted range that the minister determines. And maybe you have 400 CRS, but you've got the right work experience. You just don't know. So there'll be winners and there will be losers, Alicia, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do a couple little hellos here. So we've got Uzairs tuning in. It's good to see you. Thanks for checking in. And we've got a lot of different questions here. Usama, I think we've pretty much answered yours about waiting for the draws, and you're at 511. Anything is possible. Ralph, it's great to connect with you. Ralph up in Edmonton, my past client. Ralph, Alicia, has an interesting story because and I think we've got another little comment from Ralph here as well. Hello, Mark and Alicia. Ralph's story is interesting because he was one of the first candidates that I did substituted evaluation for on the language tests. So, so Ralph, we were able to get his express entry approved with just the speaking component. And there's provisions in there for individuals who, for various reasons, are not able to write the language test exams because of a disability. And so super happy for Ralph, and good to have you connecting in, Ralph. It's great to see you. Okay, we've got Poonam who's tuning in on LinkedIn. That's awesome. I like to see that we've got the feed going to all these different locations. And let's see who else we have here. Anastasia. Yes, hello. Good to see you. We've got Tahir's over in Facebook, and he's from Pakistan. So we got good representation. Okay, Adil is also over in LinkedIn, and he says, I'm interested to know about the Atlantic Immigration Program 2022 and how and where to get job offers for the Atlantic region. This is one of the questions we get more than probably as much as anything is how to find a job. How do you connect to get those magical job offers? Because, the AIP is an employer-driven process. It's not something that an individual candidate can apply on their own. It has to be driven by an employer located in those provinces. So I don't know if you have any quick little insights for Adil here, Alicia.
Yeah, I'd say one of the big things is look at the job bank because the job bank is a free federal website. It's put on by the government and there's no fees for you to look on there. There's no recruiters. It's perfectly free to applicants to browse and to actually sign up for job match. And there's two different types of accounts. If you don't have a social insurance number in Canada, which means you don't have a long-term work permit or study permit or the ability to work here, yeah, you are not able to sign up for kind of the higher level tier account on your job match profile. But for job seekers, you can sign up for a regular job match account. And you can put your resume on there and you can look because what happens is any employer in Canada who wants to hire somebody under a labor market impact assessment, meaning they can't find a person in Canada or they're trying to test the market, or maybe they think they have a candidate in mind and they do want to go forward with an LMIA anyways, they have to advertise on the job bank. It's mandatory. And so it's a good way to try to find which Canadian employers are hiring. And even if that job is not exactly for the same position that you have, it might be similar, or you might learn a bit about that company and be able to reach out to them. Sometimes they have career fairs and other things that you can look at. They usually have international job placement employees at those companies, and try to contact them, be targeted in your search, make sure that you get your resume out there and do your best for free, right? This is not going to cost you anything. Some companies will be working with recruitment agencies, but the companies are paying those recruiters. So be really careful if anybody says they want to charge you money to find a job in Canada.
I think I want to work at Marilyn's Kitchen. Have you been there, Alicia?
I haven't been there,
It's in
no.
Calgary. Nice. And look, to be negotiated. Nice. Awesome. All right. Okay, let's jump to our first super here. So Kishan says, hey, Mark and Alicia, if I apply for a work permit extension under the TR to PR, can I apply under other programs? Can I experience class, Atlantic Immigration Program while waiting for a decision under the TR to PR?
So I don't think he's meaning the extension, like an extension on another program, I think. So
The,
the other thing that we
the
should
bridge.
mention, Mark,
Mm,
yeah, is that there were updates to the TR to PR work permit that were also announced. And so it is now possible to apply for a longer term open work permit under the TR to PR as long as you've got AOR, acknowledgement of receipt of your TR to PR application. So that's something that has just very recently happened as well.
mhm.
So the pathway itself is closed, but for all those of you who actually submitted a TR to PR and are waiting for that application to be finalized, then these are the new changes that just came into effect 2 days ago, 3 days ago, in terms of family members being able to apply for an open work permit from outside Canada, and then being able to extend the open work permit if you already have one, or if it's in process. So these are the details that you'll want to know specifically about that program, and maybe this will solve your problem. So
Yeah.
this might be the solution to your problem here. Um, check out these new changes to the government just realizing that, if they have processing standards of TR to PR applicants for this year, but also into 2023, then they've got to do something to help these people continue to work. And so that's what's going on. Um, can you apply for other programs, CEC or the Atlantic Immigration Program, while you're waiting for your TR to PR? Yes, with the caveat that with these proposed changes in the legislation, it is possible that immigration can say, wait a minute, you already have a TR to PR. We're going to say you're not able to apply for CEC if you're already eligible under another program. Or they can direct who gets to apply to multiple, like if you're eligible for FSW and CEC, they have theoretically the ability to say you can only apply to one of them.
All right. Anastasia says, are there any options for work on a super visa? What about those parents who are in their 50s and don't want to retire yet? It's just strange to be a tourist for 7 years.
Yeah. So the super visa is not a work permit. It is just a long-term visitor visa. So no, there aren't options to work on a super visa, and it's important that anybody who's in Canada on a visitor visa, a tourist, or a temporary TRV, any of those things, you're only authorized to visit. And immigration has a broad definition for what constitutes work. So it's anything in which you're entering the Canadian labor market, so you're doing a job that a Canadian would normally do. It's anything that you are earning wages or a commission for, and it's quite broad. So just be really careful if you do have parents coming here. And this is a scenario that I've talked about a lot with students over the years and other people over the years is often somebody will want grandma and grandpa to come and they have little kids and they say, well, I don't have to hire a caregiver if I can have grandma and grandpa
Mhm.
working for free and taking care of my kids. And you get into a little bit of a gray zone if this was a job that you would have given to a full-time nanny. So just be careful in those situations.
All right. This next super is from Reshmi. Reshmi says, if there's no link given in the message sent to my CIC portal regarding my nomination from Ontario, how do I accept Ontario's nomination? How do I accept it? Sorry about that. I think maybe what he's asking is maybe a notification of interest in his portal. So I'm
Mm.
assuming that's the case. Let's see here. Well, let me just see if we can sort this out. After receiving nomination from Ontario, can I add my spouse in my profile before accepting the nomination, or just add him when I visit the Ontario website? Please help. So this one, I'm definitely going to hit our little buzzer, which anytime you're talking about substantive advice on how to proceed forward, Reshmi, book a consult. When it comes to how do I respond, and I'm just guessing that it's maybe a notification of interest. If we slide over here to the Ontario's express entry notifications of interest, you can see here that they actually tell you after you receive a notification of interest, you may submit an online application to the OINP if you qualify under the express entry stream for which your notification up here of interest was issued. You must submit your application within 45 calendar days of receiving the notification of interest. So you're essentially, depending upon which stream you went through, you're going to go to the site and you're going to actually go in and submit the application. So I don't know if you have any other insight, Alicia, other than that. We're kind of guessing at what Reshmi is asking for here.
Yeah, so a lot of people become confused about what the difference is between this notification of interest versus a nomination. So what happens for most of the programs for the OINP as well is that if you have a profile under your express entry, overall federal express entry profile, they can see it and they might say, hey, maybe we're interested in you as a candidate for the OINP, in which case they might send this notification of interest email. But that is not a nomination. That does not give you the 600 points. You don't get those yet. What you have to do is you have to complete that application through the particular stream that you qualify for under the OINP. And only after they've received that, you have to pay a separate fee to the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. Only after they've assessed it within those 45 days, so after they give you that notification of interest letter, they may make a decision to then give you a nomination, and it's only after they give you the nomination that you'll have 600 points added to your express entry profile. And then, of course, next time there's a PNP draw, you'll have a whole bunch of points and hopefully get an invitation to apply federally.
All right. Okay. Next question. This one's from Mr. Rezada. He says, I got my COPR on February the 24th, and I have not yet got my PR card. I'm never able to reach out to IRCC on their phone line. Yes, join the club, my friend. Join the club. Okay, so we've got February, March, April, May, June. So we're about 3.5 months. So 12, 13, 14 or so weeks. Let's just flip over here and see what the processing times are. So right now it's listing PR card processing at 71 days, and it was just last updated yesterday. So in your situation, it seems like you're kind of stuck. Now, I keep bringing this because sometimes there is mechanisms that we can put in place to try to jog this and get it moving forward when it's beyond the regular processing times. But the last one that I was able to assist with, Alicia, the person had been waiting for almost a year for their permanent
Oh,
resident card. So clearly that is just not acceptable in any realm of possibility. So I have a contact that I reached out to at the PR card processing, and they were able to move it forward. But the challenge that we're experiencing now is that they've got a massive, massive amount of PR cards that they're trying to process, and there may be something that we can do, Rosada, if you want to slide over to our site, which we always tell people, if you have something specific that's not of general kind of information that everybody watching can benefit from, slide over here, click on speak to a lawyer, and then book a consultation. And Alicia can totally step in and at least look at things in detail and give you the ability to see what your real options are for proceeding forward. And let's face it, sometimes, Alicia, you can confirm, sometimes there isn't things that we can do, but we'll be honest about it. And we'll tell you what your realistic chances are and what we're seeing with the massive, kinds of information that's flowing through our ever-growing firm. So, I don't know if you have any other suggestions for poor Rizada here, but yeah.
I just wanted to clear up too. I mean, once you are landed, once you have that signed, whether it's electronically signed or it was signed at the port of entry when you came, once you have that confirmation of permanent residence, you are a Canadian permanent resident. You have all the normal rights of a Canadian permanent resident. The issue is if you want to travel, right? And that's where it becomes a problem. So if you don't yet have your PR card, you either have to have your Canadian PR card in hand, or you have to apply for a travel document saying, you know what, I haven't gotten my PR card yet in the mail. I have to apply for a travel document to be able to come back into Canada. And in certain circumstances, if it's urgent for you to travel because of a family member who's ill or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, you can provide that supporting evidence and make that application. If you don't need to travel, you might not need to worry so much about that PR card and just wait for another month or two and hopefully it shows up. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and on so many levels. I had a consult this morning, Alicia, with a client who has been trying to add his spouse to his EAPR for 9 months. So before I try to think, oh no, his PR card, his COPR. Let's see, let's backtrack. Okay, I met with these clients in 2019. So he was an individual at the time, single, and it was, I think, September of 2019 when I reviewed the application and it was submitted. He then received his passport request in March of 2020. So right before the pandemic. And then it was issued in November. And you'll remember in November, that period of time, they started to issuing them thinking that the second wave was the end and they could start moving forward. Well, that didn't work. But his passport, when he submitted it and he got his visa back, it was valid until 2024. So it was the expiry of his passport. I think it was a mistake. It was an error. But anyways, that's what his visa is. And of course, like many people, they get married, right? They the human capital almost requires that you not be much older than 29, at least at the time, to be eligible. And when do people tend to kind of get married? It's in that period of time. And so many people are, held things off waiting, and then it wasn't happening. So they decided, well, I'm not going to wait anymore. We're going to move forward with their lives. And many, many people are in that situation. And when you have this perfect storm of, a country such as India that is currently taking up over 60% of the approvals through express entry, the PRs are coming from India. And you've got a visa office that had a lot of struggles with the pandemic and the virus and closures and not operating with full staff. And you have all of this backlog. It's just a perfect storm. And so, it's happening all over, not just PR cards, work permits. You guys have seen us talking about it, and the government is, trying to get into those, dig into those processing times. But I'll be honest, and I'll be very critical. When you have officers that have not been working full time, and even to this day, not all of the immigration officers, for whatever reason, are not all back to work full time. Well, how can you expect to have the system running at optimum? And how can you expect to have things turned around? And I'll also be a little critical of the minister as well, because there's this messaging that, delays in processing times are just a part of immigration. It's just a part of the process. And I'm sorry, I don't subscribe to that philosophy. There are things that the department did that made it difficult for processing to keep moving forward and to recover as quickly as it could. And hopefully, with the modernization of the system, they can figure this out. But the time for excuses is long past, and now they just need to sort it out. And many people like you guys are now in a situation where, well, yeah, you're just, there's not much you can do. And we've also seen emails, Alicia, coming from our colleagues specifically about India and how nothing comes back from there. You know, you send a request and there's just radio silence. So what do you do? Mandamus, I
Well,
guess. Yeah.
yeah, the minister was actually speaking at our National Canadian Bar Association meeting last week, and they know that things need to get modernized. They know that, and one of the interesting things he was sharing was that they've looked at the volume of calls through the call center, through the web form inquiries that they're getting, and most of them, the vast majority, are status updates. And so if you can make sure that you have a system that's going to give every single applicant real-time status updates on who's last touched their file, where the file is sitting, what's the next thing that has to get done on it, then you're actually communicating with people in a reasonable way that is transparent. And if they do that, then that's going to remove a whole bunch of backlog for officers sitting there answering status update inquiries. So hopefully they do that soon.
Yes. All right. Taggle Seer here says, "Hi, Mark. My wife and I just received our Coper last week. I would like to thank you for all of the work that you have been doing, as your DIY guide made it super easy. I can't wait to land home soon." I love that. I can't wait to land home soon. We love, Alicia, I love getting these posts. And yeah, that, like, I think you guys realize now that Alicia and I are immigration lawyers, and what do? We work with people to help them submit and file their applications. Very few people take the next step, and whether it's consultants or lawyers or whatever, to do what we do with DIY courses and master classes. And part of the reason we do that is to amplify our ability to help as many people as possible. Some firms choose to build out a stable full of assistants and paralegals and other people that, you know, you never talk hardly with the lawyer at all or the consultant. Instead, you deal with all their lower level staff, right? And that's how they maximize their ability to help as many people as possible. But for us, we've taken this approach to do collaborative reviews, which are much more efficient and allow us to work directly with our clients, as well as the DIY courses. And I can't tell you how much I just love to hear people, Alicia, who have gone through, done the course, and then have their Coper. And yeah, this is so awesome. And it's actually pretty well timed, because right now, I think many of you are aware, and many of you have actually subscribed to my top 7 tips to get ready for express entry. That email series, we don't have it on there anymore, because once the people had registered to get those emails dripped out, we then opened the cart at the beginning of June for the Express Entry Masterclass. And the Masterclass runs June 27th to the 30th, which is where I get to talk specifically with people and share insight and answer their specific questions just for this group of people. But when people subscribe and to the course now, they buy it now, they have access to all of the content, all 642 minutes of content, all of the, mastering your documents section with all the documents and everything in here. And so, yeah, it's so cool. And you know what? Like, I'm just looking here at the tagline, at the handle here for Taggle Seer, and I can't remember which cohort you were in, Taggle Seer. So you'll have to let us know which group you were in. We've had so many people go through it, and it's just, yeah, it's awesome. Okay. All right. So, and there should be a link below, you guys. If you click on the link, you should be able to access the Canadian Immigration Institute and get right to that course. Okay. Anushka here. She says, "I have submitted my ADR and my employer has submitted the supporting documents for me as well in May. Am I still going to wait for long? I really need to go back home. So sad." So there's an additional update, ADR. As far as going back home, usually we see those ADRs a lot with Outland applications, but I'm not sure. We don't know a lot about it, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, Alicia.
Yeah, it's
Probably
hard to
not enough for us
tell
to tell.
what happened, what kind of application, why do you have to go back home right now? Is your status ending? What did you submit? Clearly, you have an employer support. So I don't know. I'm not sure what you would have submitted in response or what immigration was asking for, but it sounds like you've at least had your employer follow up with them and respond to that request, which is key. You don't want to just let that slide
Yeah.
by and not have an opportunity to respond.
Yep. Okay. Well, we will move on. Anuska, thank you. Okay. Newton says, if I'm currently employed in Canada on a postgrad, can I claim to have a valid job offer for EE? This is a good question. This is a very good question. I'll give you a little celebration here. So this is one of the greatest misconceptions when it comes to job offers for people that are working in Canada on postgrads. So yeah, shed some light for, oh, sorry. Do you know what? Oh, I got fairy taught. I clicked the wrong one. That's why. Alicia's probably like wondering, what the heck's going on? This is the one that I was trying to get to. Then I'll get to
Okay.
fairy Todd's question. I didn't see which one I'd pulled up. Yes, Newton says, if I'm currently employed in Canada on a postgrad, can I claim to have a valid job offer for EE? I'm reading my little feed that's coming down. Wasn't seeing what was popping up on the screen. All right, so there we go. Let's
Perfect.
tackle that one.
Yeah, this is a really important concept. And so if you go to the immigration website and you're going to look up express entry and offers of employment, and there are specific ministerial instructions on what constitutes arranged employment, and specifically in the Act and the regulations. But when they break it down here, it's relatively plain English, and it's going to say, okay, if you are trying to qualify for federal skilled worker or CEC, these are the only circumstances in which you're going to be able to properly claim that offer of employment. So you've got, yeah, the offer, the employer has to be, can't be multiple, it has to be one employer, it's continuous work, it's full-time, it's paid, and it's a high level national occupation classification. So A, B, or O. Now, there's only 3 scenarios. So imagine these bullet points are going to be the numbers 1, 2, and 3. So this
See, I'm
offer of
also like
employment,
highlighting this. It also must be must. Okay.
yes,
Because
yeah,
most of the people have this, right? Like this is the thing. They,
right.
they they have all of these and they think, okay, great. I'm working. My employer loves me. I'm on a postgrad work permit. Yay, I get a job offer. They will give me a letter saying they will continuously employ me after for at least 1 year after my visa is issued. It's fantastic. Another 50 points. Woohoo. But no,
No,
no, no.
no, because you also have to have already been working for that employer who's going to get you a new positive LMIA. So the first one, yeah, the first one is if you were working for somebody on a PGWP open work permit and that employer has gone out, they've advertised and recruited on the job bank, they are now obtaining, they have an LMIA in hand that approves a new job offer for you, then great, you can get those points. But if you don't also have an employer that's done that LMIA, maybe you're looking at scenario 2, currently working, you're on a high skilled knock on a work permit that was issued based on an LMIA. Well, wait a minute, here you are again based on those LMIAs. You're stuck with having had an LMIA. So that's no good. Scenario 3, if you have a valid work permit, knock A, B, or O, and maybe you don't need an LMIA. So now people get hopeful, right? So
Yep.
here are the only circumstances where you can claim arranged employment or that valid job offer points if you don't have an LMIA. So take a look. It's only if you're currently working for an employer specified on the work permit. And what they mean here is an employer specific work permit. A postgrad open work permit is not employer specific. So postgrad open work permits alone never will give you arranged employment points for the purposes of express entry. So the only LMIA exempt work permits that you might be able to qualify for under this third scenario is if you're working for that employer. It's actually listed on your work permit document as employer specific. How does that happen? How do you get an employer specific work permit? Only under very specific scenarios. Usually it involves, sometimes it's free trade agreements, sometimes it's international programs. It's very specific. So you can't just apply to change the conditions on your postgrad work permit and get it to specify your employer.
And with this one too, Alicia, which is obviously this third option is the only one, like you've alluded to, that doesn't require an LMIA. There are even some more added things, which are having 1 year full-time work experience for that employer. in addition to the employer saying, yeah, we'll keep them around for at least one more year after the permanent resident visa is issued. So yeah, so that's really, wow. That's like, people pay big bucks for that, Newton. You got it for $5. There you go. Okay, now let's jump to Fairy Todd. Okay, hi, Mark and Alicia. Can parents on a super visa calculate their temporary stay days in Canada and apply for permanent residence when they meet the required number of days?
No,
So,
absolutely not. So this is what I was saying just at the beginning. This super visa is not permanent residence. It is only a temporary visitor visa. It's just super because they allow you to stay for a longer period of time. But it is only just a long-term visitor visa is all it is. So you can never calculate residency days unless and until you qualify separately for permanent residency. Come here, get your confirmation of permanent residence, be landed, have your physical stay in Canada, right? Your days of physical presence, and start to calculate that before you can apply for a new PR card, or eventually, sometimes if you are here long enough as a PR, then you can qualify for citizenship or apply for citizenship. But none of that can happen on a super visa alone.
all right. Next question is from Ruben. He says, I wanted to know if it will be a problem if my wife applies for a student visa while I have my profile in the express entry pool. Can her visa be rejected?
So this one probably needs some more specific information in
Mm.
order to be able to provide any advice, of course. But in general, if you have a express entry profile, so if one of the spouses is saying, hey, I want to live in Canada permanently, and I'm assuming that you've listed yourself as married and your spouse is accompanying in your express entry profile, immigration will be able to see that. And so if your spouse applies for a study permit, then it's possible they will do more in terms of questioning what your wife's temporary intent is, because basically she already has an express entry profile through you.
All right. Let's jump over to Farshad. And he says, and we'll work through this. So the post-grad work permit expiry is October the 25th of 2022 this year. Full-time permanent job, CRS is 436, invited for BCPNP, still waiting for the nomination to come in. Should I be worried and apply for the post-grad work permit extension now, or anything considering the post-grad work permit expires in October? What are your thoughts on that?
So again, Farshad, I mean, I'd need to get more details and information from you to figure out what's going on in your specific circumstance. But right now, there is no post-grad work permit extension or public policy announced. They have said that they will announce it, but they have not provided any details of the program.
Details.
So it's good that you have your post-grad work permit status until the fall. But of course, before your status expires, you're going to need to have applied for that new open work permit policy if you're eligible. I don't know. Hopefully, this is your initial post-grad work permit and there wasn't any other um, bridging or open extension that you did last year. So hopefully you're eligible for the new program. And if you've not received nomination from BCPNP, in certain circumstances, if you have been nominated, you've submitted your EAPR, and you are qualifying for that bridging work permit, that might be another possible solution for you. But if you don't have nomination, you've not submitted, you don't have everything locked in, then make sure that you do change your status before it expires.
All right. This next one is from Delphin. And Delphin says, I'm currently under a postgrad work permit and eligible for CEC. Can I claim additional 15 points since my WES is bachelor's degree and I have an advanced diploma from Toronto, but my advanced diploma is a fast track? And this is also one, Delphin, where we probably need a little bit more clarification what you mean by fast track. But, and the 15 points comes from completing a 1 or 2 year program in Canada. So I don't know if you have any additional issues on, any thoughts on this, Alicia.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the length of the program. It has to be at least 8 months in duration. So I don't know what that fast track program is and how long of a duration it was. But um, take a look in terms of how immigration is going to break down the points for your period of studies. If you've got a foreign degree, then yes, you have to have an education credential assessment. WES is one of the organizations that will take a look at that. I'm not sure if you're also trying to argue for, 2 or more degrees, or if you're just trying to get the Canadian education points. So that's something that it's not quite clear.
Mhm. Okay, so this is from Mohammed, and he's got a few involved here. So he says, "Hey, hello guys, can you put some light on the GSS Global Skills Strategy work permits?" And then a little bit more background. He says, "My lawyer has submitted my GSS work permit on May 26th, which is not very long ago. Upfront medical, biometrics, all were done. GTS, LMIA was also approved. When can I get results?" So yeah, if let's slide over here just for curiosity's sake. So it's supposed to go quickly. So global skill strategy and the global talent stream itself is supposed to it's supposed to move quickly. It's supposed to. But we know where there's high demand and low ability to process quickly and other priorities of the government, it absolutely impacts on processing times. And I can't remember what the last word was on the street when I was talking to people as to their most recent experience. As far as Mohammed says, I've the LMIA job for Toronto as a web developer, where even in those circumstances, I'm assuming, like, Mohammed, are you coming from India? Like, where are you coming from? Because it all comes down at times to even the volume and the processing times at each given office. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Alicia.
Yeah, I mean, immigration does post their average processing times in general. They usually put it for how long it is for the LMIA. You already have the LMIA, so now it's a matter of the back end processing of the work permit, and that's not normally broken down by program. It's just a general overall processing average depending on the country that you're currently living in. So it's hard to say unless we know where you are right now.
Yeah. This is an interesting little comment. I'm not sure if we can really respond too much, but Rock says, "G'day, Mark. It appears that ROC Support Visa Office is only working on India files. An applicant's GCMS notes by officer indicated so. Is this fair and legal for IRCC to do this to other nationalities?" So this is a classic case of people not having enough information. Clearly, they're not only working on India files. And remember, the GCMS notes are often outdated. And also take into consideration, you guys, the fact that over 60% of the applicants that are coming through Express Entry are from India. So all of those things play a role in it. And it's always fun to see how people, how they interpret these things. But oh my goodness, GCMS notes, I would not trust those to give a clearer picture of what's happening today. Anything more than, I don't know, like searching some WhatsApp group. Like it's it's
Yeah.
yeah.
So the GCMS notes are always going to be looking backwards in time, right? It's going to be whatever that officer had written as notes on the file, and then the next officer and the next officer who touched your specific file. And once you make the access to information and privacy request, it's going to take usually at least a month, often longer than a month to get the results. And then when you get the results, they're going to be dated from about 2 or 3 months ago. So it's never looking forward in time. It's what was happening a while ago. And for sure, immigration has been juggling things around in terms of who has capacity. So they're going to look at their worldwide network and they're going to say, we need a whole bunch of files processed, and we're going to see
Yep.
who has capacity to do that work. And they're going to assign those files. And if those people no longer have any capacity, they're going to bump them somewhere else. So they do juggle things around. And the reason they do it is to try to process more quickly and more volume.
I'm just going to jump back to Osama here. A question he'd asked. He says he's waiting for FSW draws to resume. He stands at CRS 511. Should he do the medicals up front or wait to receive the ITA? And so,
Mhm.
what are your thoughts on that, Alicia? When we go to the IRCC website and we look at the instructions, they now have a separate process. So, if you are outside of Canada, they are actually encouraging you not to get the medical done. If you're inside of Canada, then they say if you have already done one, then also maybe hold off because we may consider waiving it. If you haven't done one, then go ahead and request it. So for my purposes, obviously it's a little bit of a dance because they're only valid for a year. Although I've seen people get their medicals extended twice in some situations. But yeah, I advise people to be proactive, and yeah, there might be a cost of having to do another medical, but you've got it. And if it's ready to go, there's nothing holding you back. What is your thoughts, Alicia?
Yeah, if you're in Canada and you haven't done a medical, then I'd say for sure go ahead and book one. Because the other thing is, depending on where you live, some of the bigger centers might be booking up with more doctors. There's only a particular list of designated panel physicians near you. And sometimes, like we saw during the TR to PR, people couldn't find doctors to be able to do medicals in any sort of reasonable time frame because there was a rush on medicals. And so for some people who might be in Canada and they know that the programs are starting to open up again for express entry, they're booking medicals. And if you have capacity to do that and you have the financial ability to pay for it, knowing that you might have to do another one within 12 months, then there's no downside to it.
Okay, this is from a member of the Express Entry Law private Facebook group. They say, thanks, got the COPR. Okay, so the confirmation of permanence has been received. This is kind of a borderline misrep kind of thing here. So I have a flat feet, which I haven't disclosed during the medical. Doctor advised minimal invasive surgery. Should I go ahead with the surgery without informing official or do it after landing?
This is not something that's general immigration information.
No,
So
we will ring the bell because we need a whole lot more information before we can give you advice on that one. But I did want to pull it up because when people go and tune in on the Express Entry Law private Facebook group, which guys, that group has over 126,000 members. Facebook just doesn't like me apparently because I like YouTube too, and they want me just to like them. They're kind of like that friend that only wants a best friend, and they only want me as their best friend, and that they don't like that I'm friends with YouTube as well. So I had to say to Facebook, screw you, I'm just going to stick with YouTube because they're a better friend to me than you are. Anyways, long story short, the Express Entry Law private Facebook group, when people come in, we can't see their actual handle. So I wanted to pull that up and just let them know that, yes, I know you're there. Okay. Okay. Let's jump over here. What do we have next? Let's pull up a good one here. Okay. Some of these are duplications. Okay. So Amazing Buzz says, can I get an updated letter from the current employer after the OINP nomination with additional one more duty added for express entry? This new letter will have one more duty than the previously sent letter to the OINP. Thanks in advance.
So yes, Amazing Buzz, why? Why are you adding another duty? Is it a change in your job, or did you just realize you went and you looked at your national occupation classification main duties and you said, uh-oh, I don't think I have the majority of those main duties covered off in the letter. So for express entry, yes, you do need to make sure that you can show that you have whatever knock you're claiming, that you have the lead statement, so that overall opening paragraph, as well as the majority of the main duties. And to make sure, we always say 75%. So if you have 10 bullet points, make sure you have over 7 of them covered off in that job letter from your employer. However, you get into sticky situations if you've already submitted your OINP, you already have a nomination, and now you're going back and trying to change your job. So you have to be really careful that you're not misrepping. We'd need more information to kind of guide you through what do you do now.
All right. Let's see, find another question here. Okay, this is like a video in and of itself. So I'll identify it, and then Alicia, you and I, we will do this. He says, hey, I'm Rehab. Can you guys talk about the most common mistakes in spousal sponsorship? I'm from Saudi Arabia and talk about police certificate. So So obviously, Rahab, this is a video in and of itself, the most common mistakes. But I
Mhm.
can throw out a few, and then maybe you can think of a few too, Alicia. What have I seen in the past? Well, obviously, not signing the forms. I know we're in an electronic world, and that seems kind of bizarre. But at the beginning of the pandemic, I had a client who missed this one little tiny spot when they were filing via paper. So I can't remember which one it was, if it was the background declaration form or what, but it said to sign electronically on it. And so they typed their name in. But in the guide, it said to put a wet signature on beside that form. But it was so far buried in between there. And so obviously they came back to me after everything was returned saying, what is going on? Well, that was one of the issues, and they had to re-sign the form properly and resubmit everything, which was brutal. Um, Another thing that I've seen is people that have not submitted their official, legal, civil marriage certificates. Instead, they've maybe submitted the certificate that their marriage commissioner gave to them, or that their clergy, their pastor or minister, the nice fancy certificate that they gave them after they were married. So it needs to be an actual civil status document. So I've seen that a couple times happen. And these are just technical stuff. We're not even talking about failing to prove the genuineness of your relationship. But Alicia, any few to add here for Rahab?
Yeah. Sometimes things that I see too are if you have a Canadian citizen sponsor, then they can be living outside of the country
Mm-hmm.
and still submit that spousal sponsorship. But if the Canadian sponsor is only a Canadian permanent resident, they have to be living in Canada. They can't be submitting that application while they're living with you in Saudi Arabia, for example. So that's something that can be a real problem. It's also important to prove that you have, as a unit, enough money to support yourselves financially without being on social assistance. So there's things on eligibility and admissibility. And I've written a blog article all about spousal admissibility and eligibility that you can go through and take a look at. And yep, so if it's on our website, you can go to our blog. And if you scroll down, you'll find one about spousal eligibility and admissibility. And there it is. It's, yeah, back in September of last year. So make sure to look at those things because the first thing immigration does is look at whether the sponsor is eligible to sponsor the Canadian, and then they look at the person being sponsored to see whether they are admissible. The next thing that often people ask about is, well, do I do an inside Canada family sponsorship or inside Canada spouse or common law partner class or an outside Canada family class sponsorship? And this matters, and they're different. And there's different ways also of filing a spousal sponsorship application these days. We have the paper
Mm-hmm.
application or we have the online spousal portal application. And there's drawbacks of both. And so, depending on your situation, I spend a lot of time with people trying to understand their life to be able to give some strategic advice and break down what the options are in terms of where you file, how you file, what do you put in that application.
Yes. And I'll just give one little update. Late summer, we have not yet decided when we're going to do this, but we have our spousal sponsorship course and masterclass that will be launching probably, I'm thinking, well, realistically, July or August, probably. But you can go in now, leave your name and email address, and I will inform you as soon as we open that up. And also, I will be sending out periodically some emails with tips and strategies and information just to get everybody prepped up for for when we launch the course, but also as they're starting to think about these things, because there's no better time to start than now if that's the path that you're looking at going down.
And
So
I will
yes.
I will add one more
Yeah.
that's one of my pet peeves about the spousal sponsorship applications. There's a question on there. So if you are doing a family class spousal sponsorship application, there's a question on there that says, if I'm found not eligible to sponsor, what do you want to have happen? Do you want
Yeah.
your processing fees returned to you and you get your application back minus your $75, or do you want to continue processing your application? And this is a minefield because if you have a family class application, you always want to say, yes, continue processing my application because otherwise you have no right of appeal. And I don't know who would prefer $75 over having a right of
Yeah.
appeal on a refusal. So I hate that question. I don't
Yeah.
know why immigration words it like that because it's
Come on,
not at all
Alicia, you
clear to
know
people.
why. So that they don't have to deal with an appeal. They can just refuse it and the person has no recourse but refile.
And
And yeah,
it's not clear. People don't understand that. So be very, very careful. The question that asks you if you want your money back if you're found not eligible to sponsor, say no. Say continue to process the application and go to appeal.
yeah,
So be really careful with that one.
exactly. Okay, Precious Sawyer says, "Hi Mark, I've booked my appointment for passport renewal, but there's a backlog. However, I received an ADR to update my passport. If my passport doesn't come out before the deadline, what do you suggest?" So what do
Mhm.
you think about that one, Alicia?
And I've had this come up with a number of clients as well. So they're saying, we want updated information. Your file's been sitting so long that your passport's now close to expiry. And they say, we want this within usually 30 to 60 days. And if you contact your local government agency and they say there's a backlog in passports, passport renewals or extensions, and you can prove to them that you've contacted the government, they've given you the processing times, you have applied for that new passport, you're going to ask immigration for an extension and you're going to include the correspondence saying, this is how long it's reasonably going to take. I did it as soon as I knew that you wanted this information and this passport updated, but my government's saying it can't get it, and so I want an extension until X when I believe that I will be able to get my passport.
Yeah. And this, you guys, this happens for everything. So an ADR for anything that you just can't get because of circumstances outside of your control. I had, once again this morning, I had a review of an ADR request for a client, which we do these all the time, you guys. And just because they're sending out an ADR and asking for specific things, you may not see through what they're really asking. You may not fully appreciate why they're requesting a certain thing. You know, we've been down this path. We've been, as I like to say, we've been in this rodeo. This isn't our first rodeo going through this stuff. And sometimes officers are fishing for something. And, you know, sometimes it's just a general update because the file's been taking a long time. Other times what they're asking for is they want you to reiterate something that they think is a misrep, get you twice, and then they can fully apply that misrep in the 5-year bar, refuse your application, and everything is like over, done. But often when those ADRs come through, you know, when we have our consults with our clients and they retain us to help them, we go through everything. We go through all of the previous application to make sure that there isn't anything in there that potentially can trip you up. And if there is, we will put that forward at the beginning in addition to what they've asked, just to make sure everything is clear. So there's a lot of different ways to approach this. But the clients this morning, they couldn't book their medicals in time. They asked for updated medicals, and for the time period that they'd given to get the medicals completed, they couldn't schedule a medical fast enough. We've had police certificates also for another client that I had yesterday that I was reviewing documents for, and the police certificates weren't available. And we follow all the same advice that Alicia just said, you know, getting confirmation that you'd actually made the request and that it was in the queue and that you didn't dawdle, that you didn't take your sweet time doing it until the day before your time was running out, but that you did it as soon as practically, you know, as soon as you could, you made the request to not have things delay. So those are just some of the strategies that we employ. And yeah, there's nothing more satisfying, Alicia, than when I go through an application and I say, oh my goodness, did you guys realize this is really what they're asking? And they're like, we had no idea. Okay. They're not really asking you to address that thing because they're trying to use this to catch you. So let's tackle this head on, provide the response, correct it in advance. And then, yeah, we've had a lot of really resounding success doing that process. And at the end of the day, sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And so, all right, last question. This is from Ruben, and it's a follow-up. And he says, can I make the express entry profile for myself without clubbing my wife in? So without adding the wife in. I'll declare I'm married, but say she is not accompanying me to Canada to avoid further scrutiny of my wife's student visa. Alicia, do you really think that makes one iota of a difference?
No, you're still married. You're still declaring them as a spouse. They're still coming up on immigration system as soon as an officer does a search of that name and birthday.
Yeah.
So I don't see any benefit in saying that the spouse would be unaccompanying.
Yeah.
You know, if you're legitimately, if she has a good argument for a study permit application, then examine that. What's her rationale? Why does she want to study in Canada? Why now? Why can't she study locally? Why is there not a program that's available to her? What is it that's uniquely important about studying in Canada? And showing that she's got the marks and she's got the money and she's got the background in terms of education history and career history to make a study permit in Canada make sense. So all those things are key for study permits in addition to proving that temporary intent. And so what are the ties back to the home country? What's the property? What family members do you have back in the home country? Do you have kids, right? If you have kids, it makes it more complicated because who's going to take care of those children? Are you
Yep.
trying to come on the study permit? These are all questions to
Yeah.
consider.
Tons. Okay, let's rapid fire just a couple more. Mohammed just says, well, for GSS, the website says that it will process it in 2 weeks. So, how far can we trust that stuff, Alicia?
Oh, I think maybe it was a couple months ago now. People were saying it was closer to like 3 or 4 months
Yeah,
of
3 months, 4 months.
actual processing time.
Yeah.
So, yes, they say 2 weeks, but that's not always the case on the ground.
Yep. Okay. Shikendi says, hey, Mark and Alicia, many forms were just updated, right? We know that. What do you advise if someone has the application ready for submission? Do they have to complete all the new forms, or is there a grace period? I know my
So,
practice. I know what my practice is, but what's yours,
mhm.
Alicia?
So I was working with a lovely couple and we had to file their spousal sponsorship, and we were doing so, what was it, last week? Yep, last week, right before immigration decided to update a bunch of the forms. So we looked, and sure enough, on the spousal sponsorships, one of them is the 1344. And the weird thing is, we were doing an online application, and the weird thing is on the 1344 now, it gives you different ways for the validation code to appear. And immigration's going to change this form again, because on the second page where it says, is the sponsor living outside of Canada exclusively, it says yes or no. Well, the text box is all messed up and it looks terrible. So I'm sure they're going to change this form yet again. But the weird thing on the form was you used to be able to type in the date and the name of the person signing it. And then because it's even on the electronic application, you have to upload a scanned copy. People are supposed to sign it. Well, now when you try to validate it, it won't let you type in a name. And sometimes the barcode wouldn't print when they're trying to print it so that they can upload the scanned signed version. So this is causing a whole bunch of problems. So what I tell people is before you're going to submit your application, you go back to the immigration website, you download every single form, you check the version date of every single form. If they have changed it before you submit it, retype everything on the new versions of the form and submit those new versions. Maybe there is a grace period. There's no official public policy on this, but informally, IRCC has often said if by the time they receive that application, there haven't been 2 changes to the form, so it's not more than 2 versions old, then they should probably accept it.
That's the theory. Yeah. Do I trust a lower level officer not to, to understand that theoretical policy? No, I don't.
Yeah.
Here's a quick one from Risi in Nigeria. What is ADR? We're talking about ADR here, Alicia. What is ADR?
Well, sometimes it's alternative dispute resolution, but that's not what we're
Yes.
talking
No, it's
about
not.
here. So we're talking about situations where people are getting requests from immigration for additional documents or information on a file. So it's a letter that says, please provide the following by X date, basically.
Exactly. And lots of people are getting those right now, you guys, because there's been significant delays and they need updates. All right. Okay. I think we are going to wrap up with that. Yes, we'll wrap up there. Thank you everybody for joining us. It has been a really, really good go round here with our live Q&A here. And Alicia, thanks so much for connecting in. Oh, I can't help this. I love when people do this. We get lots of people saying, you never answer my question. So I appreciate Shikendi. She says, thanks so much for answering it. That's great. Okay. I like those. It's good when people are appreciative of us doing our very, very best to try to answer as many questions as possible. And Mohammed, great. And yeah, awesome. Okay, we'll leave it at that. All right, Alicia, we have a busy day ahead of us. So we'll drop off here. Alicia and I are going to record a video that we will release hopefully today or tomorrow. And it's all going to follow through from our the blog post that Alicia wrote. Let me just slide back here and make sure I got the right page here. Okay, let's go up to the top here. So right here, if my spouse is Canadian on Express Entry, how do I deal with that? And so this one right here, we're going to record a video and we're going to release it. And this is the situation when essentially people have been in Canada and they choose to go through Express Entry versus a spousal sponsorship for whatever reason. And this is how you deal with it. It's a little bit nuanced. It's a little bit specific, but this one will be, I think no one has done a video on this. So it'll be great. All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Remember, every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, I'll be there with sometimes myself. Sometimes I bring in another guest like Cedric or Chanel. And Thursdays are always Alicia and I at 11 a.m. Mountain Time, unless we have something come up, which happens as well. And then always go to the YouTube channel or wherever you're watching this video and look for the scheduled link and ring that bell or get notified so you don't miss it. All right. Thanks, Alicia. Take care, everyone.
Max.